Welcome back to this week's episode of On Record PR. We are your hosts, Jennifer Simpson Carr and Gina Rubel. Hi, Gina.
Hello.
I love that we are diving into an oldie but goodie today. Um, Employee advocacy has been a drumbeat for us as we've been speaking for, I don't know, at least over a decade now together.
At least. I was thinking back to our presentation at the LMA Southeast Conference, which had to be 10 years ago, where we talked about the COPE strategy, and we can explain that. And within that, the importance of employee advocacy before it was even a mainstream concept.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what year that was for our listeners. It was before Gina and I worked together, before I joined this amazing team. I was in-house. We had the very amazing pleasure of speaking on a panel together, and I actually just saw on my Facebook feed that the memory popped up. So it must have been in the fall. I'll see if I can go back and try to find a photo of that to put in the show notes. But
That'll be hilarious.
yeah, yeah. So back then, we were urging law firms to recognize that every lawyer, every professional, every employee is part of the communications team, whether the individuals realize it or not. And that's only become more true today. In last week's episode, we talked about your learnings from the conference that you attended in Philadelphia. Um, and we've heard for many years that people as humans trust individuals more than they do brands. So in this age of online, we're all living in a digital world. That's more true today than it's ever been, especially when every single person has the ability to send an email, post a story, share a video. They're always representing themselves and their brand. So it's amazing to see how things have transpired since, at least 10 years ago when we were talking together. It used to be a nice to have, it was kind of cutting edge, and now it's a reputation imperative. I think employees are no longer just internal stakeholders, they're really brand ambassadors or brand representatives. It actually makes me think back to our intern, Jayla, who we called at one point, her official title was a brand ambassador for our agency because she had such a strong, incredible, sophisticated online presence and was really proud to be part of our team and really connected to the digital world. So all of this to say, every time we post as individuals or interact online, every single one of those actions that we take is shaping how the world perceives us, but also how the world perceives our agency, or for those in house as lawyers or professionals, their firms.
It's funny. I'm smiling. You mentioned Jayla, and I go Jayla J. And she's an influencer, right? And just an ambassador, and that's really it. It blows my mind that we are still trying to educate lawyers about the importance of engaging on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Um, and in many respects, moving them away from a lot of other platforms that have just become noise. Uh, but LinkedIn in particular, and that's a haven for employee advocacy, which has to be intentional. It also makes me think, Jenna, about Passel and the type of products they bring to the table that allows attorneys to be more intentional with their online presence without having to do more work. And we're not paid by Passel. I just think it's an incredible platform, an incredible tool. So I wanted to mention it because it's the type of thing where attorneys are so concerned about their time and the billable hour that they forget some of these important things like employee advocacy. And when there are tools out there that make it easier, the benefit and the benefit and the return on investment highly outweigh the investment. So I just throw that out there as the type of tool that would help with employee advocacy. And it's not really about handing them a social media toolkit. It's about helping them to understand and embody the brand's purpose and doing that through advocacy, which feels authentic. So when it's authentic, I mean, think about it. This is it's not rocket science. When it's authentic, it resonates with people. That's that idea of integrity that we always talk about. And, one of the key takeaways from the 2025 Brand Reputation Summit is that research is that the employees remain the most trusted messengers of brand messages, more than the PR teams, more than the brand itself.
Yeah, it's a really important point. For those of you that don't know the agency, we actually put in our contracts that we do not serve as a spokesperson for our clients, regardless of who the client is. And there are many reasons for that. We don't have to get into all of the reasons, but one of the reasons that I've learned from you and Sarah over the years is that people don't trust the agency speaking out on behalf of a company or law firm as much as they do the leaders and individuals that represent that brand.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, that I can't stress that enough. An agency, I take issue especially when it's a crisis and I see a crisis agency speaking on behalf of a brand. That just says, yes, we agree that this is a crisis. Like that's just, it's not okay. And so I'm so glad you mentioned that we even have that in our contracts.
So when we talk about metrics that matter in professional services, and obviously specifically with law firms, it's not about the vanity metrics, the likes and the shares. It's about real impact. When we talk about these metrics for employee advocacy and what matters, we're talking about speaking invitations, whether that be on a podcast or at an industry conference. Media citations, backlinks have become even more important. They've always been, but even more now as we're learning from our great colleagues, Leslie and Izzy, about GEO and how it's changing search. Backlinks from places that you've been cited as an expert source. Peer referrals, that's always been a great metric, but as an advocate of your brand, it's important. And then follower growth on platforms like LinkedIn, where your clients are, where your prospects are, where future talent is searching. Growing your following there and getting engagement is so important. And also, I think the other one that comes to mind is invitations to company events coming directly from the attorneys. So whether that be the attorneys sending them directly to their peers or working with their in-house teams to use CRM in a really meaningful way to extend personal invitations. And let me just clarify that, Gina, because I know this has come up with GCs. They want to see that you have thought of them personally. So you can work with your in-house team to send invitations or messages that come from you personally, come from your email address, come from your tone of voice, but that's leveraging your CRM system in a way that's meaningful for your in-house team to be able to support you and also have that data and information internally to grow those relationships.
And Jen, we're doing that right now. So we're next week when we're at LMA Tech West by Southwest, we're going to have 5 team members there, or 4 team members there, and 2 members of the international faculty. And each team member has their own relationships. And while we are sending a formal invitation, we're also asking them to send private invitations so that it's coming from a person that the other person knows. And that's important. And not only are we asking them, they're the ones coming to us and saying, is it, I'd like to invite so and so from this law firm. Is that okay? Of course it is. So it's really about that personal touch. And I just wanted to mention that when you were talking about invitations.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the point of that, all of that, is that the ROI of employee advocacy, because I know that when we think about engaging in initiatives and asking our employees, our lawyers, our team to invest their personal time and resources. It's not just about measuring these hard metrics. So many people liked my post or so many people engaged. That's important and it shows growth and engagement and all of that. But it's really about the trust and credibility that we each gain and how that leads to new opportunities. It's a lot of what we've talked about in our past two episodes around trust, emotion, and building that reputation. What did you call it? A reputation arsenal, a reputation bank, um,
Reputation capital.
capital that people can draw from.
And it ties into everything else that we've been discussing on the podcast lately, including the fly that won't leave me alone in my office. I feel like Linus um, in the Peanuts. If anybody's watching this, I keep trying to swat a fly. Um, that's not distracting. But we've been talking about AI transparent and transparency and reviews and influencer credibility, and it's all interconnected. And it's like this ethical use of AI, for example, and one in particular, generative AI, and ensuring accuracy and transparent engagement, which builds authenticity. And it's the employees who amplify and humanize the messages. They're the connective tissue between the technology and the brand values and the audience perception, which builds into that reputation capital, which is what my whole presentation was about at the brand summit, was about building reputation capital before you have a reputational incident, because you will be more trusted as a result. And the example I used was in 2018, Starbucks had an incident in Philadelphia, um, and it was a diversity incident, and it was awful. And I think the next day or within a few days, Starbucks closed down all of their stores for a day to do bias and DE&I training. And they not only had the trust previously, but they said, here's how we're going to maintain your trust. Consumers now, in the moment, think about how much revenue they lost in one day.
Sure.
And it didn't matter because they used that reputation capital to manage a major trust breach and to do something that made a difference. And we're still talking about it. That was 2018. It's now 2025. So these are the types of things that create that reputational capital. And it's that alignment of, technology, people, and purpose that create that consistent voice across every platform. And that consistency is what builds trust over time. And, I also, in my presentation, I talked about that taking courage, because you're empowering employees, which means giving them a voice. And it means trusting them to represent your brand and equip them with the training and the context to do so confidently. And that's, again, these are all the things that build that reputation capital. And then you're rewarding them for it because you trust in them, and people want to be trusted. They don't want to be micromanaged or treated like children, or told, for example, you can't speak online about anything that has to do with anything.
Mhm.
It's recognition is such an overlooked part of this with employee advocacy. So when firms celebrate that authentic advocacy, when they engage with their employees, when they highlight the employees who share thought leadership or model the firm values, it reinforces the culture of employee advocacy.
Yeah, those are all really great points. I want to go back to one thing that you said. We practice what we preach here. And I think this is a really important point as we all get so much more familiar and accustomed to using tools to create efficiency. So, just like the Passel tool that you mentioned and many other tools that are available, we tell our clients to use the COPES method, which is create once and publish enthusiastically and strategically. And how can we help the lawyers maximize their time, or how can the in-house teams help them? Well, they can prepare content that the attorneys can copy and paste into LinkedIn, right? And so that's a great process. But the tools can only do so much. And what we're talking about here is positioning your attorneys, your employees who are going to be advocates for success but it is incumbent upon each of us as humans to personalize that content and make that human connection that you're talking about, Gina, which means that if your team is using a tool to generate 4 or 5 posts that are different in tone and content, but on brand, that you also encourage your employees, and it goes back to something you always share with us, which is rules and tools, to take that content and personalize it in a way that's authentic to you, right? Authentic to the tone that your LinkedIn network expects to hear from you. Or, if you use sarcasm or humor, or you always start your posts in a certain way, take that time to humanize it, because that's why it goes back to why your network trusts you more than it does your brand. So, with all of that, I'm going to pause here for a message from our sponsor. And then when we get back, Gina, I'd love for you to walk our listeners through some actionable steps they can take to strengthen their employee advocacy programs, and, a few quick tools that they can implement pretty quickly to maximize their time that they've listened to this podcast episode.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So, Gina, we're back from our sponsor break. And to summarize what we've talked about so far, culture is really the foundation here. You can't have a strong advocacy program with your employees without trust and without clarity. I mentioned rules and tools. You tell us all the time, set your people up for success by giving them the rules and tools that they need to succeed. So, for our listeners, especially law firm leaders and communications professionals, can you please talk about some steps that they can take right away to strengthen their employee advocacy?
Absolutely, Jen. Before I do,
Okay.
I just have to say the rules and tools came from my husband teaching me that. My husband, Scott Rubel. And I just have to say that because I always like to give credit where credit is due. Um, that's something that he taught me from a sales perspective because he's been in the sales world for 30, 40 years. So just wanted to, hey, shout out to my husband.
Hi, Scott.
I actually listen to him. But when we go back to the steps to strengthen employee ambassadorship, there's 5 of them. It's defining the purpose and value clearly so that the employees know what they're representing. It's providing guidance and training, rules and tools on how to communicate effectively and ethically online. It's recognizing that they're authentic advocates who are already doing this well and recognizing the ones who are doing it well and getting them to be ambassadors to get others to do it well. Uh, Measuring meaningful metrics. So, influence, reputation growth, engagement quality, and fostering a culture of openness and trust so that people feel empowered to share the firm's story. And I want to repeat that, fostering a culture of openness and trust so people feel empowered to share the firm's story. So you really have to look at your firm culture and ask yourselves, are we fostering a culture of openness and trust if we are going to ask our employees to be employee advocates? And it's no different than saying to law firms, if you want to have people cross-selling, it can't be an eat what you kill mentality. So again, rules and tools and live the culture and values.
It's a great framework. It really touches upon what we talked about 10 plus years ago and how much it holds true today. Reputation's built through clarity of intent, consistency of action. You mentioned courage in your communication, giving a great Starbucks example. It actually made me think while you were telling that story, how much money a firm invests when a group of executive committee members sits around a table to make a really important decision. It is an investment that the firm makes in, the future of the firm. So,
which is why we have our objective decision-making framework for executive committees so that they take the emotion out and focus on the objectives.
right, right. We'll share a link to that, but I think that's a great point as well. And before we close, I just want to say that I think the last point that you made about your culture is really important, because as a human, we want to be invested and supportive of the content that we share. And so having a really clear definition of who your brand is, right? Who's your firm, who's your agency, and empowering people to feel proud of what it is that you're asking them to represent online is going to position them to be authentic and to really engage in a meaningful way. So, thank you so much again for a great conversation. It sounds like this summit was really incredible. And thank you to our listeners. Remember that your most powerful influencers might be sitting down the hall from you if you're in the office, or across the Teams or Zoom screen from you, and make sure that you're giving them the tools and resources to be successful. If you have enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show, share it with friends or colleagues. We always appreciate a review. We also appreciate you sharing your ideas and topics with us at podcast@onrecordpr.com. And we will see you next week.
See you soon.
Bye.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.